Okay, so welcome to the show, Katy.
Hey, thanks for having me, Luke.
I'm really excited to talk to you. You know, it's funny, I have this show called The Stylist, and it's about building the ultimate lifestyle, right? Based on principles of health and spirituality. And it's been pointed out to me on a couple different occasions that I am sorely lacking in physical movement. Like, I've only talked about fitness in general a couple times, and people are like, how are you going to have a lifestyle if you just sit at a desk all day making a podcast? And especially my brother Cody Storey, who's like really big into natural movements, a fan of yours, and has a gym here. He's like, dude, you're missing a huge piece. So you're my first official guest on the topic. So I'm excited.
Very cool.
So my goal here is to let our audience know about your approach to movement and how we might be able to apply that into our modern sort of urban lifestyle. A lot of my listeners live in cities. Some don't, but many do, just based on my background. And so I live in Los Angeles. I've been in Hollywood for 29 years now. And my whole like biohacking lifestyle is all built around kind of mimicking nature and oftentimes using technology to kind of create a natural environment. So that's what I'd sort of like to focus on today, but we'll see where it goes. So the first thing I'd like to ask is, I'm going to read your bio and kind of explain a bit of your background off the air, so we don't even have to go into that. I want to just get right into the meat of it. But what is your take on natural movement in general, and how does that differ from what we might consider exercise? Because I think most people that live in the city and most people I know, if you ask them if they move, they're like, oh yeah, I go to the gym every day. I move like crazy. But I think you have a different definition of that.
Well, a bulk of my career has been, I think, dedicated to differentiating between exercise and movement. And I don't think it's necessarily the byproduct of living in a city as much as the fact that we all live in a sedentary culture. So I live in a very rural area now after many years in Ventura County, as we were just talking about. And I've been in other places in the world which are more rural, and I've been to New York City, and it doesn't really matter where you are when you're within a particular culture. There is this idea that exercise is the movement that humans need, right? That it's exercise. So I like to start off with kind of likening exercise more to supplements. So as supplements are to a whole food diet where they're extracted nutrients that you take in small forms. You don't really change how you eat throughout the day as much as you go to the special place to buy those special supplements. We think of movement in that same way where, oh, I have to move my bicep and I have to move my pecs and my hamstrings and I have to move my heart. We think about them as these separate nutrients that we go to a special place to get. You need a special outfit, you need a membership, or you need to pull time out of your regular life, right? You're not working during your exercise time, you're not being social, you might not be tending to your relationships or to your family. It's very extracted from movement, which is just, I mean, my mouth is moving right now. My eyeballs are moving, parts of my eyeballs are moving depending on how far off I'm seeing things from my face. That movement is the phenomenon of changing position, whether it's of your whole body or the cells within your body, which is going a little bit deeper into movement. Where exercise is clinically, the definition of exercise is when you're moving your body specifically to extract the health benefit from that bout of movement. There's nothing else really happening except you have decided to challenge your heart or your hamstring or your butt or whatever. And so it's more a mental distinction between the two, but it ends up having physical consequences in that we all kind of, I mean, I'm sure it's no different in LA than anywhere else. Everyone needs to move more, right? We keep hearing that message. You need to exercise more. You need to move more. You're too sedentary. You're sitting at your desk. Your brother's telling you. But realistically, how do we fit more exercise into our life, right? It already took so much to get an hour a day regularly on the calendar. If you get 10,000 steps in a day with your Fitbit, you're feeling extra victorious. So when someone tells you that, no, you actually need like 4 or 5 more hours, that natural movement is something that humans do throughout the day, that your life really should be more physical, it should require more physicality from you. That if you keep thinking along those exercise lines, most of us don't have the privilege of having 5 or 6 extra hours to do whatever we want with, and that we could go to the gym. So that's the distinction. It's an intention distinction. You're intending to reap only physical benefits when you exercise. In one of my books, the way I just make the distinction is, your brother's in natural movement. Maybe he has suggested that climbing trees is a good way to like tone your shoulders, and maybe there's a tree climbing class, in one of the parks where you live. That would be exercise if you're going to a tree climbing class. If you were, however, to go to, I'm trying to think of like urban area, like maybe you drive somewhere to pick apples in the fall, right? That's like a thing you're going to do to celebrate the season with your friends, and you climb that same tree, you do those same motions. Your intention is not to get the physical benefits from it. Your intention is, I'm enjoying time with my friends, I'm getting some food from it or whatever. So you still get the physical benefits. But during that bout of non-exercise movement, you got more. And so that's kind of ultimate time management, which anyone in a city, I think, would benefit tremendously from.
That's a really great way to summarize your message. And I'm thinking of like, oh, if you live in the city, then you have to do all this extra stuff to move. But I mean, you live in like rural Washington, right? Is that
now? Yeah.
Okay,
yeah. Now I do.
So I could be living out in a redwood forest, but still sit on my ass and watch TV all day, or still sit on my ass and like
Sure.
at a computer all day. So I see it is not so much like location dependent. It's more about like, it really is about your intention and the way that you view it. So I think the way that we've evolved in our culture now, or at least speaking for myself, is like, and why I've never liked exercising. And for those listening, I'm doing air quotes on YouTube. You can see them. Hi, air quotes. I've always just hated the gym. I don't like sports. I don't like exercising. When I was a kid, I sucked at sports. I wasn't coordinated. I wasn't strong. So I equate going to the gym as something like horrendous that I don't want to do, but is necessary to do to be healthy. And your approach is more like, how can we find incremental ways as we live our normal lifestyle to add more movement? But what I found in your latest book, Movement Matters, is that this idea that we actually, as we quote unquote evolve, which is really a devolving and becoming more domesticated, we tend to outsource every minute movement. Like now I'm noticing after having read that from you, like when I go out to my garage, I'm not going to walk up to my garage and manually open the door, because like I can save time and energy and movement by just clicking the clicker that I have hidden under the stairs. And
Right.
so I caught myself today. I was like, well, what would happen if I just walked the extra 20 feet? I'd have to bend over. I'd have to exert a little arm strength probably to lift it up. And, it's just like, oh, no, I don't have time for that. I'm going to pay someone in China like 50 cents a day to make me a remote control and a garage door opener. And I'm outsourcing that movement to somewhere else. Am I kind of getting your concept on that?
Yeah, and to expand, you need more time, like so that you can go to the gym to do the bending over, lifting over your head movement. That it's just that. It's like we can't outsource, we can't get rid of our biological need for movement, although we can outsource because of our position globally as a particular group of people. We can get other people to do those movements for us, or to do the movements to make the technology that requires that we don't move it. But we are left with this time-space continuum problem, which is you still required all of that movement throughout your life, and now you're stuck with the dilemma of too convenience of a life, and you still need 8 hours of movement. And the only way to get it is to put it back into your life, which is to stop outsourcing it.
Right. So it's like that our lifestyle necessitates taking time aside,
Yeah.
which is the time that I've never liked. I'm like, God, I don't feel like going. Even now, like my brother's gym is down the street. I mean, I have no excuse not to go there, but I'm like, God, I don't feel like it. And it's not even like a gym. You don't lift weights. It's all like, gymnastics and mobility and really fun stuff in terms of physical movement, but it's still time I have to take aside, or at least I think I do. So that's a really interesting way to look at it, because I can see as I live my life, my goal every day is to like almost it from the outside would look like I'm trying to minimize the movement by using technology,
Right.
so that I move as little as possible so that I can be more productive,
Yeah, it actually, to an outsider, I like those explanations. Like if aliens came down and looked, what would they gather from looking at us? It would be clear that we are trying to that we prioritize sedentarism culturally, that's a value, so that we can maximize our time spent gathering probably income through the least amount of effort possible. That's actually our culture in a nutshell, based on what it looks like. And so, but a lot of these um, outsourcing of movements are unconscious, right? Like right now, you're talking about what your garage door opener is limiting you from. The next step is to go, you can't really even find a manual garage door opener anymore. They don't even make them any longer. So, as the culture, whether they are aware of it or not, kind of buy into the less movement is better, more convenience is better. And you could reframe convenience to just mean less movement. It's an easy word swap. That it becomes more and more challenging in our habitat to find movement because the technology is there before you've actually requested it. And it's like in Move Your DNA, I talked about bucket seats. All the seats in the cars used to be upright, straight back, flat, not that comfortable because you had to hold yourself quite a bit. And then it started to get more reclined and more comfortable. And then now bucket seats are in anything. So when you have kids, you just put your kid right into the bucket seat, and now they don't even have the ability to not use it. So culture does shape us physically, and we start adapting to it, and then we just then adapt the culture more to our sedentarism, and that's how they relate to each other. Sedentary culture perpetuates itself by making sedentarism more and more easy on you, and you don't even know that it's a choice. You just think it's the status quo.
That's awesome. I love the way you look at things. You very much remind me of our mutual friend Daniel Vitalis. He
Mm.
frames that, his whole rewilding thing and all that. He frames things in a very similar way. Where like I like the zooming out 30,000 feet, or your aliens coming here and like really look at us. I think that we become so accustomed to our lifestyle that we're so close up we can't see it. It's just
Hmm.
like, well, what's wrong with that? I have a remote for everything, so I don't have
Right.
to move. This is awesome. But then what happens when you're 65 or 70 years old and you end up, with all of these health issues and you can't move? I mean, my brother kind of got me in the habit of doing this is, watching older people just walk down the street and look at how they move. And there actually shouldn't be anything wrong with them. But what's wrong with them is the lack of movement in their life. And that
Yeah.
they've become almost like they're systemically atrophied. It's just like the
Hmm.
whole body's like, cool, we don't need to move. All right, I'm shutting this down, shutting that down, shutting that down, joints, etc. So I love the way that you're able to frame things. It's very cool. So I want to get into another question then, and that would be, what, without like a fundamental movement practice, if one wanted to just all of a sudden get in shape, and so they just go to the gym and they kind of do these isolated, really unnatural movements, what are some of the risks involved in like our version of exercise now? Or what do you think some of the things are lacking?
Oh,
Like
it's
if
probably,
if I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go to CrossFit and get ripped, and I
yeah.
just start doing deadlifts, and I don't have joints that are actually able to sustain any weight, like that kind of thing.
Well, I wonder if more people are familiar with this idea when everyone went to minimal shoes, right? That was like Vibram started appearing. People were runners and they thought they read like you're not supposed to wear shoes. It's natural for the feet to, be naked in the over the jungle. So then they just started barefoot running on the cement. And what you saw initially was a lot of injury from that. Like, yes, bare feet are natural and we have all the musculature in there to support your entire body weight, but training takes time, adaptation takes time. It's not simply because you just like will it to be so, in the same way that you can't be on the couch and be like, I'm going to run a marathon tomorrow. To do that would be to introduce quite a bit of tissue damage all at once, because you're ever adapting. The whole reason you exercise, you think of exercising for a different shape, but what you are doing is you are adding and removing parts to your body through adaptation to make a subsequent bout of movement easier on you. Like that's the whole point, is you're moving to make moving easier. That's why you can adapt. And And in the same way, you're adapted to your chair, you're adapted to your sedentarism to make sedentarism more easy on you. You're always just adapting to what you do most frequently. So you want to get in shape or join, do large movements. I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting to do large or big movements. You just have to think of, what have I been doing up until now? And how, can I take that large movement and break it down into 10 smaller movements, and practice those as a program? And then is there a way to start tying them together in something? I work in loads, right? So I'm always thinking about, how heavy is this for my body to carry? Or how heavy is this move? Like, how does it change the way my body parts are pressing on other body parts? It's kind of loads in a nutshell. So can I take this big giant movement that I'm trying to do and do a smaller version of it? And if I do it and see the result of doing it, whether it was an injury or too much soreness, or maybe you didn't do it enough and you're not seeing the adaptation, that you're constantly tweaking the design of your movement program to get you closer to your goal. I don't think we have a lot of end goals with our movement, right? It's very nebulous. It's like, I'm moving to be more healthy. The doctor said I should move to be more healthy, or it's anti-aging, or I want, a ripped body. Like, we have sometimes we don't have specific goals. And sometimes even like a ripped body isn't that specific. It's very hard to evaluate if you're on the right track with your training program. And a lot of times, one of the reasons I like to differentiate between movement and exercise, or the difference between health and fitness, is you can be very fit and also not be very healthy. We've kind of confounded the two sometimes. So where I work with a lot of athletes who are arguably some of the fittest people on the planet, yet they require surgery and medication and medical intervention at a rate equal to or exceeding total couch potatoes. So that's, if you're exercising for your health, you want to be like, whose program am I following here? Like, I know you want to train like an athlete, but is that athlete prioritizing health, or is that their job or their income, right? So they're just, movement science is very complicated, and I think it's been kind of simplified where it's just move more, right? Which is like the registered dietitians of the world saying, just eat more, right? If you eat enough, hopefully you'll stumble upon the right balance of nutrients, and you won't have any of these malnutrition issues. But we've learned a lot. Like, you can't do that. There are specific dosages of macro and micronutrients, or certainly ailments that go along with having certain macro or micronutrients dietary wise. And what I just propose is it's the same for movement, that there's a dosage, that there is lots of different types of movements that you need to keep all of your cells functioning well biologically, which is always my approach to movement biologically.
Yeah, I've seen the manifestation of what you're describing where, because as I said, I've never been into fitness. I've never been, horribly obese or anything like that either. But, I've done like the bare minimum. I like yoga, hiking, swimming, the gentle stuff. I'm not like your high intensity workout guy until about a year ago. Because I finally just caved and listened to my brother's wisdom. But what I've seen is like, living in Hollywood, there's a lot of people that are very fit looking from the outside because it's about aesthetics. If you're a model or an actor, an actress, I mean, you go to the gym really you do have a goal. Your goal isn't to be healthy.
Yeah.
And to, have something sustainable that's going to provide longevity to your physical health. It's like about how your six pack looks, But what's interesting is when I go to mobility classes, I see a guy come in who's super ripped, super fit. I'll look at him and go, oh man, I wish I looked like that. He's stoked, but then you see him like, he's basically immobilized because his version of, physical health has been pushing weight, contracting muscles, and then maybe doing some stretching to like, quote unquote, stretch the muscles back out, I think just through a lack of knowledge. But my goal has become more like when I see someone who has great mobility, that's actually more appealing to me and more of like a worthy goal than the aesthetics at this point. Like, I want to be able to move like an ape moves, like a natural human is meant to move. And it kind of pisses me off that I've led a lifestyle that doesn't allow me to move in a way that the human body is designed to move by nature, And so it's interesting because now I'm not so motivated to like go lift weights and try and get ripped. I'm 46. Like, what's the point? You know what I mean? It's like, I'm not a model. I'm never going to be one, but I would like to be able to move, and I'd like to alleviate some of the aches and pains that are coming with, I guess you could say middle age, gulp. So it's interesting to hear it like that. So along those lines of just like, okay, I want to build muscle and become flexible. What's the difference, say, between flexibility and mobility? Because you have a lot of people that are ripped but don't have mobility.
Well, just to hold on to that
Okay.
thought for a second, I wanted to back up to something that you just said, which I think is an important distinction, but I cannot remember what it is that you just said because I got lost on the flexibility, the mobile. Oh, it's that idea that, okay, I want to exercise for more mobility or more muscle mass. I think even those types of goals, they kind of fall short because you don't want more muscle mass for muscle mass's sake, right? Like if you just had more muscle mass, what you want is, and I'm assuming what you want is to be able to move more without pain to do particular activities well. Yes, which require muscle strength and joint mobility. But the end goal, I think we end up focusing on this is where that nutrient centric perspective keeps coming in. We keep thinking the end goal is more mobility, which is like, yay, I can put my arm over my head. But where some people can't do that. Like for me, just to reach my arm over my head so easily is something that a lot of people will come to me going, I wish I could do that. But after this surgery, I now have frozen shoulder and I can't put my arm in front of me or behind. Fine. What does that keep you from doing? I can't pick up my child. I can't get dressed myself. I can't go hiking or backpacking like I used to. So I think it's really important. I think gym, health, fitness, exercise is a very specific culture of people who enjoy exercising for exercise's sake. Then there's someone like you who, again, I'm assuming, who is like, I don't really dig the whole exercise for exercise sake. Like I enjoy moving and being outside and hiking with my friends or just enjoying the trees as I go by. Like you are saying that your ability to move through your life brings you joy, which is different than those who get joy simply from the movement process, of which I think there is a group of people, of which I think I am one. I think people who go into movement education are people like, you could put me in a tiny box with no light and no other people, and I'm going to stumble upon exercises and do them every day for the rest of my life because I am innately an exerciser. Like I get joy just from the exercise itself. But most people I do not think are like that. I think that they get their joy or their flow in other aspects. I think movement is a component of everyone's flow. It's a biological essential. So it has to be woven through. But when someone who is not an exerciser hears they need to exercise more, I think it falls flat as opposed to, those things you used to do when you were 12 that you thought were awesome that you can't do now because your back hurts. That's what you're after, not a back with more mobility and more strength. It's to do those things you did when you were 12. And if you can keep that in your mind, your movement has purpose now. And you're stepping out of the exercise culture and you're saying, I want more movement in my life for life's sake. You're not exercising more for more muscle mass or for more range of motion. Those things are not important to anyone really outside of a physical therapist or someone who studies movement. The general public's like, how is movement going to help me? Oh, it's going to help you live the life that you on paper would like to be able to live. So if you can think about it that way, I think you'll already be changing paradigm. So that's the first thing. Going back to the difference between flexibility and mobility, technically those are just terms that differentiate between tissue types. Like your joint is mobile where a muscle is more flexible. So it's just about which tissue you're referring to. I don't think that, how could I tell if my shoulder joint is mobile or flexible? It just depends on which tissue type you're talking about.
Right. Okay, cool. Yeah, that totally makes sense. I want to. I think I was sitting here when you were mentioning talking about feet before and like the barefoot right now. I have to go into that because I'm like, did she see in my notes somehow? I'm like, how? That was like I had a very specific question about that a few years ago. I was living in the Hollywood Hills, and it's wonderful to hike around there, and it's also great to run around there. There's not a lot of traffic. It's beautiful. There's a view. There's trees. And somehow I came across the book Born to Run. And for those of you listening, it's, a book all about how there's these tribal people that discovered that, well, we don't actually need shoes, and that shoes are what screw you up, and kind of what you went into. So I just decided, I was like, oh yeah, this makes sense. I mean, a hunter-gatherer would never wear like these puffy sneakers around running. I'm like, these joggers are all idiots. And so I got my little Luna minimal sandals and started running around the Hollywood Hills. And next thing you know, I can't fucking walk because my knees are like destroyed. I'm running up and down hills. I'm trail running. I was like, oh, this is the best thing ever. I'm like I was visualizing like past lives where I'm like a Native American running through the hills, and this wonderful. But it really started to hurt my body because like you said, I had no adaptation. I had adapted to becoming a flat-footed, zero arch kind of person, or fallen arch kind of person, and really hurt myself. And I've been rehabbing from going barefoot. So what's the deal with like human beings being designed to walk around without puffy shoes, without high heels, and now we're domesticated and our feet are hurt and atrophied, and like me, I have those pronated ankles and fallen arches, and it's a disaster now. So now I'm like afraid to wear puffy shoes or shoes at the heel because I don't want to make it worse. I don't want to get arches from a podiatrist, and I don't want to go totally minimal anymore because then it hurts my knees and my ankles fall in more. It's like, oh my God, what is going on with our feet and our domesticated shoes, as Daniel calls them, feet casts, I think.
Right. Foot casts.
Foot casts are little tombs that we put our
foot
feet
coffins.
in. Yeah, there you
coffins.
go. Yeah.
Well, so I think, there's this, that statement, we're designed to move, I think sometimes buries the lead, which is we're designed to adapt. You adapted to your puffy shoes. You adapted to the frequency with which you sit, and you adapted to the frequency with which you're inside, and the frequency with which you have walked on flat and level and done your exercise on flat and level for the bulk of your life. Yes, you've got the hills behind you, which are great, but if you measured how many steps you've taken on human, artificially leveled hard, like your structure represents that. So to me, the difference between barefoot or shod and unshod, Luna sandals or puffy sneakers, the unmentioned brand name puffy sneakers, but we know they're Air Jordans, that is equal in distance between couch potato and marathon. Like your feet, because they've been in a cave their entire life, have never even experienced the bulk of your weight. Like they have never been asked to do anything. And then, of course, in their adaptation to not doing anything, other structures have collapsed and fallen, and different parts of you have become shock absorbers. And you just took that out and you removed a technology that you've adapted to. So this, one of the things that I find really fascinating is like when a human evolves, does the parts of that anatomy of a human include the technologies that were there? So like there's like in evolutionary biology, there's this idea that when fire came on board, fire changed so much about us, and then you added tools and stone tools, and that started there's a morphology that happens to the technology, a change in the physical structure that you can correlate to when the technology came on board and decreased our physical performance somehow, changed the structure. That you have to think of those puffy shoes as part of your body, right? Your body had come to depend on them. Orthotic is the same thing. They're bolsters. Without those bolsters, you're physically collapsing because you don't know how to use the muscles. Sometimes you don't know how to use them. Sometimes you just don't use them. And sometimes the geometry of your body shuts those muscles off. So there can be lots of different things happening there. But when I hear someone in your situation, it's like, okay, let's stop. Because what happens is you get to the point where, like, I read in a magazine that those puffy shoes are going to, kill my back and my hips and my knees, and I'm not human if I wear them, right? Is that kind of implicit message? But if I go barefoot or in my minimal sandals, I'm gonna like hurt my back and my knee. Like, so you're the only decision is to not move. It's like, I guess I'll just do a podcast then because I can't, because I don't know which one to do. So the key is just think about that exercise science, that person getting up off the couch. Like, you have to take smaller steps. You're taking such a huge leap that both ends of the spectrum like aren't working for you. So you just slowly start moving over years, maybe a decade from one to the other. And you go, okay, maybe there's something between my puffy tennis shoe and my sandal. Maybe there's foot exercises I could do that would have given me more muscular support, or something about my form I should have learned that to change beforehand. So there's just probably so many steps in there. And I say probably, but I really mean for sure. And I've written a whole book on that. Like, what are the steps?
I saw that because I know you had a book about for women ending foot
Yeah.
pain, and it looks like it's been renamed or else re-updated to Simple Steps to Foot
Yeah.
Pain Relief, which I don't have yet. I'm obviously getting that like as soon as possible. Is
Well,
that?
whole body barefoot's probably the better one for
Oh,
you.
okay,
Whole
okay.
transitioning well to minimal footwear is the subtitle. That is exactly the book to go, oh, I see. I didn't know that my weak feet caused like my whole body to slump forward, and that when I took them off, I just ran on the fronts, smashing down a particular. You didn't know how to. You didn't have enough skill set. Your toolbox could have been a little bigger, I think,
Yeah.
besides the new pair of shoes.
Well, it's crazy too. I mean, and I interviewed a holistic dentist the other day, and it's like just everything in that industry is totally backwards. And I think if you go to a traditional, your family podiatrist or whatever, like I just went to one recently, and she literally suggested, like, she didn't say anything about what shoes I wear or if I exercise my feet or the kind of terrain that I'm walking on, and if there's any diversity in that terrain versus, concrete
Yeah.
or walking around the woods, like no mention of that, like not even in her paradigm. She goes, well, I could put these silicone implants in your arches and just give you arches. I'm like, it's come to that. I mean, that's the
Yeah.
solution rather than like, let's change the behavior and let's change the environment. And I mean, I actually was like, well, if that means I don't have to do any work, I mean, I considered it, but it was so Frankensteinian that, I left going, yeah, I'm going to try something natural before that.
Well, I mean, especially if you haven't ever strengthened your feet. I mean, like you have 33 joints in each foot. Like, you could have a full on CrossFit training program just for your feet. And it does not include just doing regular exercises barefoot. There are really specific movements for your feet that give you a much more stable foundation with which to do large whole body movements like jogging.
Do you ever wear high heels? Like if you're
No,
going to a, fancy dates, I mean,
no,
like, I don't know how, I mean, I've been in fashion. Well, I'm now retired, but for
yeah.
17 years. And it's like, some guys really find it attractive when women wear high heels and like, that's their thing. It's like lingerie and high heels are super sexy. Like when I see a woman in high heels, I feel so sad. I mean, it doesn't even it look hot to me because I'm like, oh my God, you're like hurting yourself so bad. Like what? What's a woman to do? I mean, is that just the price that certain women are willing to pay to feel that, sense of, aesthetic or what? I mean, is there any way a woman can get away with wearing high heels here and there and like still have foot health, or is that just like you're just toast?
No, I think that I think that your health is the sum total of everything that you do. There's a difference. I mean, it's like saying, can I eat creme brulee twice a month and be okay on those special occasions? Or does that equal, like, can I eat creme brulee for every meal every single day? Obviously, we know that there's two physiological outcomes between those two things. So, I mean, wearing heels is a large category of lots of different behaviors. It can be every day, all day long, or it can be fancy occasions. And those two things are, obviously, hopefully, very different. I don't wear heels to answer your question anymore, but I used to as a younger person. But I would say more so because it's what's expected of you. If you're in fashion, so much of fashion is culture, and it's about. I mean, there was an interesting piece in the Washington Post on what is it called? It's athleisure wear. Athleisure wear is this new category. I mean,
I'm
like you
into
would,
it. I
yeah,
love
yeah,
it.
yeah. You would never see flip flops or yoga pants in New York City. Like I do a lot of press junkets, and I'm going into all the biggest magazines, and everyone there looks like they came off a runway, which means full. It's not always couture, but it's like dressed to the nines, and we're talking heels that seem about that high every day, because as this author was trying to say, like, that's the polite thing to do, that you are respecting other people by wearing these clothes that limit your movement. So if you want to talk about sedentary culture, she actually said to put on something that allowed you to move freely, like flats and bendable pants and shirts that weren't highly structured, that you in fact it was an infraction against other people. It was demeaning to other people, and it spoke to your perhaps privilege, that you were so privileged that you could just lounge around the day while everyone else was busy moving, which is an interesting way of thinking about it, where I would think almost along those same lines of, yes, I mean, the fact that we don't have to move very much is also part of our privilege, kind of as a culture, that we can get other people to do that. But that to continue to dress in a way that maybe looks a particular way, but disables us from being able to move, is a cultural phenomenon. It's a cultural thing. It's a decision that we're making, and then we're maybe requesting of other people, like, are you not professional if you don't have clothes that immobilize you? Like, I find that whole cultural aspect of sedentarism very interesting.
That is really, really interesting indeed. Yeah, it's funny. I mean, just obviously coming out of my background, and I don't work within the fashion industry, but I have a fashion school. I mean, that's my bread and butter. And so what I do really for a living, aside from the podcast and this stuff, is I teach people how to enter into that industry that's totally based on aesthetics. And I've always sort of grappled with the concepts that you're talking about, because on one side you have fashion as an art form, and it's a way to really represent yourself and your personality and your aesthetics, and it's such a creative outlet, designing, how you dress. And when you go to New York City, oh my God, I'm like so fascinated just to people watch, because people just express themselves in such a beautiful way. But the other side of it is feeling like you have to fit in, and you can't actually be you if it falls outside of being fashionable. And so I'm at this juncture in my life now, like, I literally just want to wear like yoga clothes all the time. Like, yeah. I just can't stand wearing like tight jeans, and like, oh my God, I used to wear these, like rock and roll kind of boots and stuff. I'm like, oh my God, how could I ever wear boots? I mean, I'm like, right now I'm wearing my little Uggs slippers and yoga clothes, and I just went to yoga before this, and like, I actually walk around town in my slippers now in Hollywood. I'm supposed to be like Mr. Fashion School guy, and it's just like, I just can't do it.
Yeah.
It's just, I want to be able to be comfortable and move my body, and it's really hard to do that and like, quote unquote, look cool and professional at the same time.
Well, first of all, I can't believe that we've actually came around to fashion, because I would have never imagined in a million years that I would talk about fashion, because I'm the least fashionable person ever. But what's very interesting is I have a young daughter who's 4 now. I've never worn high heels. She's never seen them on me. We're very conscious when we're buying books to make sure, when you look at the characters in books, you will see that almost 100% of the time, female characters of books are put in high heels all of the time. So we like monitored all of that. But here she was desiring high heels. We don't have television. I don't know how she even came upon it, but it was very clear that there was something that a high heel gave her innately that she wanted. And so like, it took me a minute. So I'm thinking about that earlier question of like, what's making people want to do this? So I couldn't believe that a desire for a high heel was natural, given that high heels don't grow on trees, and you don't see them in like the collective shoe wear for the bulk of human history, where you do see, shoes made of different materials to offer a little bit of foot protection. But it's where I clued into what is natural for humans is adornment. And to be able to separate that for her only way of seeing people adorn feet was shoes, right? And so the shoes that we gave her weren't affording her the expression that she wanted. Like, she wanted something different. And when she saw it, she's like, this is different. And the way that I feel when I'm adorned differently, which I think is, aren't all animals like looking for some sort of peacocking behavior to set themselves off? So I got her foot jewelry. And once she had the foot jewelry, not interested in the high heels any longer. And once I allowed her to paint her feet. And so I think that maybe fashion is really the only form, maybe outside of body art, which is its own culture sometimes, is that most acceptable form of adornment. You can't really step out of the box too much as far as your physical structure without being labeled counterculture. But fashion is the culturally acceptable way to adorn yourself, and it's just an extreme form of an adornment. So
Total.
that's my total fashion commentary for
No,
2016.
I'm right there with you, absolutely. And that reminds me, I'll make a note of this. I'm going to have my producer Tati send you some of these little things called schwings. My friend has a company called Schwings, and they're for kids, and they're these little wings that you tie on the laces of shoes, and kids like love them. And that might be fun for your daughter as a way to kind of like have her personality. So I'm making a note to myself. But yeah, it's an interesting thing with fashion and movement, because it's like, so I think the male version of high heels is wearing a necktie and like a fitted shirt.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, but like you can't even breathe. Like, how are you going to do deep, kind of core breathing with this literally like a noose around your neck? It's
Yeah.
just, it's so weird to me. But the other side of it is, being from that background, is I really feel a certain energy and a confidence about myself when I'm wearing a $3,000 suit. You know what I mean? It's like you walk into an interview or a meeting and you look badass and you feel badass. It really carries an energy. So it's an interesting thing. Like, I don't know. I feel better physically and being able to move when I'm dressed sort of, in my slobby yoga clothes. But I would never feel comfortable like walking into a badass
Yeah.
meeting and pitching a TV show or, whatever. It's like,
It's
I
not
think,
your power. It's not your power. You have a power
yeah.
outfit, and then you have okay, I feel like I can do things outfit. Yeah.
Yeah, and even it's like it's a certain energy field, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
It's like even sometimes when I do an audio only podcast, I'll sort of dress up in my. Today I just didn't have time, so here I am with you on camera in a t-shirt. But I'll even kind of wear like my nice jeans, and I come in my studio and I look nice even though no one sees me. It's just totally audio, but I just feel confident because
Mm-hmm.
I'm not wearing pajamas. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? So
Yeah.
it's interesting.
Well, I think there's maybe a new space now. So heels were that was the only shoe option for women for years. It's only been recently for men and women for shoes that minimal shoes have opened up this new category. So that lends itself to new innovative design. It's like, is there anything else we can do for shoes to make them convey power or style without reverting to the easiest thing, which is like, we'll just make everyone taller. There's got to be some innovation. That's a nice thing, is culture does also create innovation. And so, is there a new spot in fashion where you can get these gorgeous power clothes that also allow you to be more powerful, literally, right? Like, you are actually very weak in an outfit that doesn't allow you to move. It's so interesting that what we perceive as powerful is actually the opposite. You are disempowered by your outfit right now, yet it's invoking this particular sense. And I also wonder, having a very particular, I have a rare body segment size, that's not where it's designed in the fashion. Like, I have very broad shoulders, very narrow waist, very broad hips. Everything is cut to make people look like they have a particular shape. And so I wonder how much of our clothing and our style is based on sedentary bodies that don't actually have that shape, where we're getting clothes to get the illusion of what a powerful body would look like, where you could get that just through moving.
Oh,
You know?
totally. Yeah, we teach that in our classes. Actually, when we're teaching people how to become a stylist, when you're dressing a man, you're creating a V.
Yeah,
And so you have a guy that's like never built any strength, doesn't have any upper body. I mean, if, you have your body
yeah,
types that you're inherently like
sure.
mesomorph, ectomorph, endomorph, that whole thing. But you have to take a guy who's maybe really out of shape and is a couch potato and is bigger around the middle, who's kind of an endomorph, right? And you've got to take him as a stylist and build up shoulder pads and like a big upper body, because it doesn't inherently exist because of, some genetics, but also
Sure.
lifestyle. And then same thing with a woman. What you're going for is like that hourglass, even if the hourglass isn't there. So, these are like tricks of geometry that,
Yeah.
people that dress themselves, some know how to do. And those that are fortunate enough to hire someone to dress them are really hiring that person. What I think it is just, innately is the giving you the highest likelihood of finding a mate.
Sure.
You know, it's like the ancient female sees the man with the big upper body, he can protect and bring home a deer, you know, and the man sees the hourglass in the female form and, you know, sees a good provider for the offspring.
Good mother.
Yeah, good mother,
Exactly.
you know. So I think that's where that stuff comes from. But
Sure.
the whole fashion industry is really built around that sort of biological instinct. Right. And it's interesting. But I love where it's hopefully going, where you can kind of have your own identity and personality and represent yourself to the world in a way that's creative and artistic, but that also allows your body to move and function. It's like I've been putting off getting the Vibram 5-finger shoes. Like I know those are probably like a really good option for me, and that's my one breaking point. I'm just like I just fucking can't. I just can't do it. You know. Yeah. I mean, out in the woods or something like that, but I'm like, my ego is still intact enough where I don't quite have the humility to just own that and walk around Hollywood in those shoes. I already have to explain to people when I wear like my Earth Runners or my Lunas. They're like, bro, what are you wearing? What's up with I'm like, oh, it's minimal footwear. And then I have to like explain them the whole thing, you know? So anyway, it's funny. So I'm looking, what was the type of fashion you talked about? The athletic,
Athleisure.
Cool. Yeah. I didn't even know that had a name, and now I really should, though. But I'm looking forward to more of that.
I am too. And I mean, there could be, I just had this idea for a book. I read a lot of books where you could have like, here's your stylish dressing tips for, you know, this. And then here's the exercises if you want that underneath your clothes, like where you would match the two, dressing for a particular body shape and then moving for a particular body shape, you know, to kind of approach both at the same time as a transition. Sorry, that was a total segue, but that was
that's cool.
An idea out there for your listeners who are entrepreneurs, maybe like
absolutely
with that book out.
Yo, listeners, you fashion people, those of you that are out there, like please come up with some shoes that don't hurt your feet and don't look atrocious. While we're on the topic of aesthetics, and I've, you know, poked around your site, which by the way, people listening, her site is a treasure trove of content. It's overwhelming. Thankfully on your site, you're like, are you overwhelmed? Start here. Like you go on there, it's like, oh my God, I'm so far behind. But something you do is you outline kind of your home environment and what you've created there, which is like a furniture free zone essentially. And while we're on the topic of aesthetics, you know, I'm always grappling with being a visual person, and I love interior design. I love art. I mean, I'm really into my apartment's fixed up, and, you know, when people come over, they really enjoy the space I've created, and I enjoy it. But it is set up to just sit on your ass. You know, I mean, I have a pull-up bar, and I have my little, you know, exercisey toys around that I try and, you know, grab here and there. But, you know, how do you deal with having a home that's aesthetically pleasing and that you can bring strangers in that aren't accustomed to your lifestyle and still kind of live a normal life without having, you know, furniture essentially?
Well, that's a good question. I've actually thought of hosting a contest and asking really good designers, like pick 10 designers. And I say, I want you to design an amazing, you know, what we call it furniture free, but I have air quotes around furniture free because I have tons of furniture. It's just it doesn't look like typical American furniture. There's people all over the world who use the floor as the main part of their life. They don't have a house full of all of these pieces, right? All these pieces are very expensive and then luxurious. And I ask everyone to calculate their chair to butt ratio of their home so they can see how many seats per their one seat that they have.
Oh my God, that's scary. I just started doing the math. I'm like 15 to 1, I think right now.
It's really, I mean, some people are like 63 to 2. And I'm like, well, your environment's sending a signal. Fortunately, I mean, so like we think of these as like West Coast. I'm from the West Coast. I was born in California. My kind of furniture-free bohemian is out there maybe for California, but when I have friends come over from the East Coast, it's way outside of the box, right? So decorum, again, we're talking about its manners to have, you know, everyone have a seat around a dining table and, you know, to have all the seats, like it's a cultural issue. There's a way we have of relating to other people where you being on the floor below someone makes it awkward for them. If you've ever tried to like sit less because of the sitting is the new smoking, and now you're at a conference and you're lording over everyone, and it's like you're rude if you stand, you're rude if you sit, you're only not rude to other people if you continue to sit on chair level with everyone else. Like if you do anything different, it makes you kind of
Yeah.
rude.
I've noticed just sitting in a squat for business meetings freaks people out
Yeah,
too.
it freaks people out. They're like, why are you doing that? I had a friend who was a student in the kinesiology department, and the teacher's like, why are you standing there? And he's like, because sitting isn't like I'm trying to move more. And the teacher's like, what are you? This is a professor of movement. And it was over his head. He was like, I don't get it. Just sit down. You're making me nervous. But to go back to that decor, I think that it's like adornment for your house. It's design. I think I've had a really couple of really great submissions where people are making things out of low pillows. Like just look at your decor. Is all of the seats, do they all are they all at the same exact height, right? Like there's balance to a home. It would be perfectly fine, I would say, to throw out a couple floor cushions, a couple of those. They're not bean bags, but they're something a little higher than a floor cushion that allows people to sit. And then your regular chair where you're offering variability. You're normalizing an environment for lots of people who want different types of movement. You are actually making it more acceptable to move more in your home. I did a talk a few weeks ago in Canada, and they had put a picture on the back wall saying, standing room here, where they made it social, like having that sign give everyone permission. Now the person standing isn't being rude. Like they followed the rules that the Institute has set up. So we throw a lot of parties. People know they're on the floor. We have a couple of benches in our home for people who are physically unable to get all the way down, but just mixing it up a little bit. Go, oh, look at your house and go, oh, everything is exactly the same height. If next time I replace this furniture, I'm going to get a couple of low things. Go buy a couple of cushions and just start using them, and don't even change your furniture yet. And you will find slowly over time that you'll be moving more.
Cool. I love it. And speaking of furniture in the house, there's been a big craze over the past few years of the standing desks,
Mm-hmm.
and, that sitting is bad for you. And I got on board with that. And so I'm like, cool. So I'm get a standing desk and I'm just going to stand up all day. And then I found like, oh my God, my ankles hurt, my knees hurt. I'm like, wait,
You didn't learn your lesson with
yeah,
the vibros.
yeah. I'm like, this is like working in a factory. This sucks. It's like
Yeah.
we went from like factory, conveyor belts where you're standing there in the 40s and 50s into sitting at desks in the 70s and 80s. And here we are. And I read a quote in your book, Movement Matters, which I'm going to read. It says, so it's like, are standing desks right or wrong? Should we be standing? Should you be sitting? And I love what you said. You said identifying the problem as the wrong type of stillness and not as stillness itself.
Yeah.
So what I've been doing since I discovered if I sit for too long, I start to hurt. If I stand too long, is I try and just alternate. I got a great thing called, I'm staring at it, called an ergotron. And I have a giant iMac, computer, and basically it carries that. And then you can just move it up and down at will and spin it around every which way. It's so fantastic. And what's cool about it is the keyboard is down at arm level and the monitor is at eye level. Because what I notice is a lot of people have a laptop at a standing desk and they're still, like on YouTube, you can see me, but they're still looking down like in that hunched position, what you'd have when you were looking at your cell phone or something. Like they're not ergonomically, they suck. The whole standing desk thing. So what's your kind of, we only have a couple minutes. What's your nutshell solution to a workstation? And I know you have something, a kit on your site about that too, which I'm going to explore.
Well, dynamic workstation. It's a dynamic workstation. Like it's the same thing that you already understand about movement, which is movement is better than no movement. And that like there is no one way to sit for 8 hours or to be unmoving for 6 hours that won't hurt you, whether it's sitting cross-legged on the floor. So in my office where I am right now, I have a standing setup and then lots of things at my feet. And then I have a low desk where I can sit on the floor. So I can change. And there's a lot of new Very desks and things where you could actually set it for 4 different heights. It could just be one thing in your office and you program it for 4 different things because your hands don't always have to be low. They could be lower or high. It's about movement, right? So you can cycle through your joint configurations daily, which is great. But maybe you can, if it's like very labor intensive to change things around, you can cycle through them weekly or do a new position every day. Just do whatever you can. Find what's acceptable and doable, and just start using your body less repetitiously. Right? That's the whole point. Is you're just consuming a lot of one single position over and over again. There's nothing wrong with sitting. It's sitting for 7 hours and then sitting for 3 hours after you did your bout of exercise. Just too much of not moving.
What do you think about taking breaks? Like something I'll do is I have a rebounder and I'll just go jump on the rebounder for 5 minutes, or I have
Yeah.
one of those balance balls and I'll just kind of lay on my back and get this big spinal arch going and just chill there for a couple minutes, or I hang upside down or go to the pull-up bar, do a couple pull-ups, hang for a minute. Do you, I mean, I'm assuming you encourage just taking breaks. Are there any
Yeah.
other little tools like that that you might recommend?
I wrote a whole book on this called Don't Just Sit There, but I also wrote a piece for an author, an award-winning author, and she was like, I don't know how to not sit still and be productive. So much of when you're writing is these long bouts. And the piece that I wrote for her was the bulk of what we do has this element of creativity for it. Very rarely are you sitting in front of your computer with this minute by minute output and creation. There's hours sometimes where you're just sitting waiting for the thoughts to fuse in your head or to think of the next line that you're trying to write. There's no need to be sedentary during those bouts of time. In fact, it actually shows that outside movement, movement first with outside movement being even more, is what boosts your creativity. So I have found, as someone who writes a lot and spends a lot of time on a computer despite lots of movement, that I recognize when I've stopped producing and I start moving during that time and let the ideas work themselves out in my head. It doesn't require that much focus, and I do some movement-based activity. Not always, an exercise is great. Sometimes, though, I've found that I like a non-exercise movement-based activity, like doing a chore, running an errand, where I'm crossing multiple things off my list, which is how I pair the idea of I want to be moving more than I want to be exercising with I also still need to be highly productive. So that's my solution.
I like
Is
that.
move, do some sort of errand or other life task during my creative time. Don't always think about it as like now I'm at home and I'm doing my home tasks, now I'm at work and doing my work tasks, now I'm with my family and doing my family tasks. Like that whole parsed way of thinking is the problem. There's just your life. Your life has all of these elements all of the time, and you don't want to push out your friends and family from your work time. You want them to be in it. And you don't want to push movement away from your work time. You want your work time to be in it. So it's like reintegrating our brains and then thus our life.
I love that. That's a great explanation. Really good advice. And now I want to ask you, as we're about to come to a close here, what's the most natural way for us to take a poop? Are you,
Oh,
and I'm assuming you know about the squatty potty, which
sure.
I've been using for a while. Do you have any other recommendations? A lot of people probably don't realize the human body's not designed to sit up high on a
Yeah.
throne. Could you give us just a quick piece on that?
Yeah. Well, the tubes of elimination line up best when you're in a squat position, meaning the amount of exertion you have to do when you're not squatting is greater than when you are squatting. Like you're actually having to, put in something into the equation because your tubes weren't using gravity to their fullest extent. So enter the squatty potty is an easy, low profile urban solution. I also think that pooping outside and peeing outside is amazing. Like there is this whole, I think that there's this whole, are you familiar with earthing, right? They started
For
talking about,
sure.
hey, like,
Yeah.
so I think that there's something to perthing, which is what I call the earthing that happens when you pee on the ground.
Oh,
That,
right,
right?
right.
Like there's going to be an exchange of electrons there. Is that important to humans? I don't know, but I find that there's something about it. We think about health and like the physics of it all, but then you think of, the ecology of it all, the fact that that's the spread of human seeds and whatnot. I mean, our diets are, we don't necessarily want to be populating the earth with our food from all over the world, but that that's part of the give and take of earth, right? You take from the earth and you consume and then you give back. But right now we don't even do the give back part because our give back is so toxic. Our taking from the earth is toxic, and our give back, we've just removed it and we're just slowly parsing ourselves kind of out of the natural scheme of things. So pooping outside in the woods is just the best.
That's so funny. I've never actually heard a woman talk about like enjoying peeing outside. Like every guy knows it.
Oh,
It's
it's the best.
it's so sweet. Like if you have a backyard and you just go out there and you can take a leak in your yard. And women usually are like, why are you doing that? Go inside. Gross. I'm like, you don't get it, but you get it, Katie. Thank you.
Best. The
Thank you.
best.
I want my listeners in New York City and Hollywood to take the pooping outdoors with a grain of salt.
Exactly.
The operative word there, the operative word there is in the woods.
Yeah, in the woods.
Awesome. Okay, so last question I want to ask you is, you've taught me so much, you've taught our listeners so much today. Who have been 3 profound teachers in your life? Which could be a book or a person or, a philosophy or anything.
I really like Erwan LaCour, who's the creator of MoveNet. I think he's a cool guy. Arthur Haynes is another kind of rewilding guy. I like natural plants. Robin Kimmerer, she wrote Braiding Sweetgrass, just on indigenous wisdom and plants. That's 3. Those are 3
Awesome.
people. Those are great just resources for movement and this idea that plants are super important to humans and vice versa. So yeah.
Great. Yeah, those are 3 people that I'd love to have on the show. So thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to add them to my roster.
All right.
So, or my wish list, that is. So in closing, let us know where we can find you and all your fabulous work. I mean, as I said, your site is just like so full of content. And from one entrepreneur to another, I want to say, like, well done. You've really got some amazing offerings, and just like you have such a robust body of work and options for people. So where would you like to point our audience?
Nutritiousmovement.com is a good place. As you mentioned, it's overwhelming. If you're like visual and you don't want to go through reading, my Instagram account, I think, is a really great place to get educated through pictures. Go, okay, I get it. Like a small little blip of information and a big dose of information via picture is really the easiest, I would say, in our fast-paced kind of world.
You just reminded me to do an Instagram story of you right now. So I'll tag you on there for sure. Okay. Cool. Well, that's it then, huh?
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. We're right on time, 1 minute early. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. Really lovely to meet you sort of in person and to share your message with my audience. So until we meet again, you have a wonderful day, Katy.
Thanks, Luke.